Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for gathering together to immerse ourselves in this rich body of wisdom we call Torah. We're going to read through the English translation of this week's portion, which is Ki Teitzei. We're going to be reading in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, beginning with verse 10. And after the conclusion of our reading through the English translation, we'll have our collaborative conversation about it. If you'd like to join me in saying a blessing, giving thanks in this moment, please feel free to do so. Baruch atah Eloheinu
Haolam shanu b'mitzvotav v'tivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Thank you.
Amen.
This opportunity to immerse ourselves in words and deeds and relationships with Torah. Let us honor this moment together, both here with who's here in the present and with all the richness of the past that surrounds us and accompanies us along our way. So we're going to read beginning with chapter 21, verse 10. I'll share with you the opening verses and I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. When you take the field against your enemies, and Adonai your God delivers them into your power, and you take some of them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her and would take her wife, you shall bring her into your house, she shall trim her hair her nails, and discard her captive's garment. She shall spend a month's time in your house, lamenting her father and mother. After that, you may come to her and have her, and she shall be your wife. Then should you no longer want her, you must release her outright. You must not sell her for money, since you had your will of her. You must not enslave her. If a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one, when he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat as firstborn the son of the loved one in disregard for the son of the unloved one who is older. Instead, he must accept the firstborn, the son of the unloved one, and allot to him a double portion of all he possesses, since he is the first fruit of his vigor. The birthright is his due. If a man has a wayward and defiant son who does not heed his father or mother and does not obey them even after they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his town at the public place of his community. They shall say to the elders of the town, "This son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He's a glutton and a drunkard. Whereupon the men of his town shall stone him to death. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. All Israel will hear and be afraid. The man is guilty of a capital offense and is put to death. When you impale him on a stake, you must not let his corpse remain on the stake overnight, but must bury him the same day. For an impaled body is an affront to God. You shall not defile the land that Adonai your God is giving you to possess." Richard, would you like to read a little bit at the very start of chapter 22?
That's so good. If you see your fellow flocks and sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. If your fellow does not live near you, or you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow claims it. Then you shall do the same with his ass. You shall do the same with his garment, and so too shall you do anything that you do with anything that your fellow leaves you when you find. You must not remain indifferent. If you see your fellow ass or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. You must help him raise it. A woman must not put on man's apparel, nor shall a man wear women's clothing. For whoever does these things would have a point to the Lord your God. If along the road you chance upon a bird's nest on any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother sitting over the fledglings or on the eggs, do not take the mother together with the young. Let the mother go and take only the young, in order that you may fare well and have a long life. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone should fall from it.
Thank you, Richard. Catherine, we're at verse 9, if you'd like to read for a bit.
Yes, Rabbi. You shall not sow your vineyard with a second-hand kind of seed, else the crop from the seed you have sown and the yield of the vineyard may not be used. You shall not plow with an ox and an ass together. You shall not wear cloth combining wool and linen. You shall make tassels on the four corners of the garment with which you cover yourself. A man marries a woman and cohabits with her, then he takes an aversion to her and makes up charges against her and defames her, saying, I married this woman, but when I approached her, I found that she was not a virgin. In such a case, the girl's father and mother shall produce the evidence of the girl's virginity before the elders of the town at the gate. And the girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave this man my daughter to wife, but he has taken an aversion to her. So he has made up charges saying, I did not find your daughter a virgin. But here is the evidence of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread out the cloth before the elders of the town. The elders of the town shall then take the man and flog him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver and give it to the girl's father, for the man has defamed a virgin in Israel. Moreover, she shall remain his wife. He shall never have the right to divorce her.
Thank you so much. Mark Levinstein, we're at verse 20, if you'd like to read.
Thank you, Rabbi. But if the charge proves true, the girl was found not to have been a virgin, then the girl shall be brought out to the entrance of her father's house, and the men of her town shall stone her to death, for she did a shameful thing in Israel. Sweep away evil from your midst. If a man is found lying with another man's wife, both of them, the man and the woman with whom he lay, shall die. Thus you will sweep away evil from Israel. In the case of a virgin who is engaged to a man, if a man comes upon her in town and lies with her, she'll take the two of them out to the gate of that town and stone them to death. The girl because she did not cry for help in the town, and the man because he violated another man's wife. Thus you will sweep away evil from your midst. But if the man comes upon the engaged girl in the open country, and the man lies with her by force, only the man who lay with her shall die, but you shall do nothing to the girl. The girl did not incur the death penalty, for this case is like that of a man attacking another and murdering him. He came upon her in the open. When the engaged girl cried for help, there was no one to save her. If a man comes upon a virgin who is not engaged and seizes her and lies with her, they are discovered. The man who lay with her shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife. Because he has violated her, he can never have the right to divorce her.
Thank you, Mark. Jim, we're at the very start of chapter 23, if you'd like to read a bit.
Thank you, Rabbi. No man shall marry his father's former wife so as to remove his father's garment. No one whose testes are crushed or whose member is cut off shall be admitted into the congregation of Adonai. No one misbegotten shall be admitted into the congregation of Adonai. None of his descendants, even the 10th generation, shall be admitted into the congregation of Adonai. No Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of Adonai. None of their descendants did not meet you with food and water on your journey after you left Egypt, and because they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor of Aram Naharami, to curse you. But Adonai your God refused to heed Balaam. Instead, Adonai your God turned the curse into a blessing for you. For Adonai your God loves you. You shall never concern yourself with their welfare or benefit as long as you live. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your kinsman. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, for you were a stranger in his land. Children born to them may be admitted into the congregation of Adonai in the 3rd generation.
Thank you so much. Let me invite David and Susan. We're at verse 10, if you'd like to read it a little bit.
Okay. Susan's asking not to read.
Okay.
When you go out encamped against your enemy, you shall be watchful against any bad thing. If there be among you a man who will not be pure by a night occurrence, then he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come inside the camp. And it shall be toward evening, he shall wash in water, and when the sun sets, he shall come inside the camp. And you'll have a location outside the camp, and you shall go out there outside. And you'll have a spade among your equipment, and it shall be when you sit outside that you shall dig with it. And you shall go back and cover what comes out of you. Because Hashem your God is going within your camp to rescue you and to put your enemies in front of you. So your camp shall be holy. And so he won't see an exposure of something in you and turn back from you. You shall not turn over to his master a slave who will seek deliverance with you from his master. He shall live with you among you, and in the place he will choose in one of your gates, where it is good for him. You shall not persecute him. There shall not be a sacred prostitute from the daughters of Israel, and there shall not be a sacred prostitute from the sons of Israel. You shall not bring the price of a prostitute or the cost of a dog to the house of Hashem your God for any vow, because the two of them are both an offensive thing to Hashem.
Well, thank you so much, David. Carl, would you like to read a little bit? We're at verse 20.
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall not deduct interest from loans to your countrymen, whether in money or food or anything else that can be deducted as interest. But you may deduct interest from loans to foreigners. Do not deduct interest from loans to your countrymen, so that Adonai your God may bless you in all your understandings in the land that you are about to enter and possess. When you make a vow to Adonai your God, do not put off fulfilling it, for Adonai your God will require it of you, and you will have incurred guilt. Whereas you incur no guilt if you refrain from vowing. You must fulfill what has crossed your lips and perform what you have voluntarily vowed to Adonai your God, having made the promise with your own mouth. When you enter another man's vineyard, you may eat as many grapes as you want until you are full, but you must not put any in your vessel. When you enter another man's field of standing grain, you may pluck ears with your hand, but you must not put a sickle to your neighbor's grain.
Thank you, Paul. Tom and Jackie, we're starting chapter 24, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Thank you, Rabbi. Ready?
Oh, but householder takes a wife and becomes her husband. She fails to please him because he finds something obnoxious about her, and he writes her a bill of divorce, hands it to her, and sends her away from his house. She leaves his household and becomes the wife of another man. Then this man rejects her, writes her a bill of divorce, hands it to her, and sends her away to his house, where the man who married her last dies. Then the first husband who divorced her shall not take her as a wife again. And since she has been defiled, for that would be abhorrent to the Eternal, you must not bring sin upon the land that the Eternal, your God, has given you as a heritage.
When a householder has taken a bride, he shall not go out with the army or be assigned to it for any purpose. He shall be exempt 1 year for the sake of his household, to give happiness to the woman he has married. A hand mill or an upper millstone hat shall not be taken in pawn, for that would be taking someone's life in pawn. If a party is found to have kidnapped and then enslaved or sold a fellow Israelite, that kidnapper shall die. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. In cases of a skin affection, be most careful to do exactly as the Levitical priests instruct you. Take care to do as I have commanded them. Remember what your God Adonai did to Miriam on the journey after you left Egypt. When you make a loan of any sort to your compatriot, you must not enter the house to seize the pledge. You must remain outside while the party to whom you made the loan brings the pledge out to you. If the party is needy, you shall not go to sleep in that pledge. You must return the pledge at sundown, that its owner may sleep in the cloth and bless you, and it will be to your merit before your God Adonai.
Thank you so much, both of you. Carol? Hi, Carol. We're at verse 14, if you'd like to read a little bit.
Thank you, Rabbi. You shall not abuse a needy and destitute laborer, whether a fellow countryman or a stranger in one of the communities of your land. You must pay him wages on the same day before the sun sets, for he is needy and urgently depends on it. Else he will cry to Adonai against you, and you will incur guilt. Parents shall not be put to death for children, nor children be put to death for parents. A person shall be put to death only for his own crime. You shall not subvert the rights of the stranger or the fatherless. You shall not take a widow's garment in pawn. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and that Adonai your God redeemed you from there. Therefore, do I enjoin you to observe this commandment. When you reap the harvest in your field and overlook a sheaf in the field, do not turn back to get it. It shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, in order that Adonai your God may bless you in all your undertakings. When you beat down the fruit of your olive trees, do not over them again. You shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not pick it over again. That shall go to the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Always remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore do I enjoin you to observe this commandment.
Thank you so much. Linda, you want to read a little bit? We're at the start of chapter 25.
Okay, did that work? I hope so. Gracious sakes. When a man takes a wife and is intimate with her, and it happens that she does not find favor in his eyes.
Start of chapter 25.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
There is a dispute.
Yes, thank you. There we go. If there is a quarrel between men and they approach the tribunal and they, the judges, judge them, and they acquit the innocent one and condemn the guilty one, and it shall be, if the guilty one has incurred the penalty of lashes, that the judge shall make him lean over and flog him in front of him, commensurate with his crime in number. He shall flog him with 40 lashes. He shall not exceed, lest he give him a much more severe flogging than these 40 lashes, and your brother will be degraded before your eyes. You shall not muzzle an ox when it is threshing the grain. If brothers reside together, and one of them dies having no son, the dead man's wife shall not marry an outsider. Rather, her husband's brother shall be intimate with her, making her a wife for himself, thus performing the obligation of a husband's brother with her. And it will be that the eldest brother who performs the Levirate marriage, if she can bear, will succeed in the name of his deceased brother, so that his, the deceased brother's name, shall not be obliterated from Israel. But if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, the brother's wife shall go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother has refused to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He does not wish to perform the obligation of a husband's brother with me. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him, and he shall stand up and say, I do not wish to take her. Then his brother's wife shall approach him before the eyes of the elders and remove his shoe from his foot, and she shall spit before his face and answer him and say, thus shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's household. And that family shall be called in Israel, the family of the one whose shoe was removed.
Oh, thank you so much. Just I'm going to honor. Do you want to read, or should I prefer not to read this evening?
Please continue. It's no problem. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. So let me invite Jay. Do you want to read a little bit? We're at verse 11.
Unmute.
Okay.
Unmute.
There you go.
11. If two men get into a fight with each other, and the wife of one comes up to save her husband from his antagonist, and puts out her hand and seizes him by his genitals, you shall cut off her hand. Show no pity. You shall not have in your pouch alternate weights larger and smaller. You shall not have in your house alternate measures larger and they smaller. You must have completely honest weights and completely honest measures. If you are to endure long on the soil that Hashem your God has given you, for everyone who does those things, everyone who deals dishonestly, is abhorrent to Adonai. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey after you left Egypt, how undeterred by fear of God, he surprised you on the march. When you were famished and weary and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. Therefore, when Adonai grants you safety from all your enemies around you in the land that Hashem is giving you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget.
Thank you, Jay. And Margot, we're now at the start of chapter 26, if you'd like to read.
When you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you as a heritage, and you possess it and settle in it, you shall take some of every first fruit of the soil which you harvest from the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and put it in a basket, and go to the place where the Lord your God will choose to establish his name. You shall go to the priest in charge at that time and say to him, I acknowledge this day before the Lord your God that I have entered the land that the Lord swore uh, to our fathers to assign us. The priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down in front of the altar of the Lord your God. You shall then recite the following before the Lord your God. And this is what you should recite. My father was a fugitive Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. He became a great and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Lord, the God, our Father, and the Lord heard our pleas and saw our plight and misery and our oppression. The Lord freed us from Egypt by the mighty hand of an outstretched arm and awesome power, and by signs and portents. He brought us to this place and gave us this land flowing with milk and honey, whereof I now bring the first fruits of the soil before the Lord our God, and bow low before the Lord our God. And you shall enjoy together with the Levites and the stranger in our midst all the bounty that the Lord your God has bestowed upon you, and you and your that on you and your household.
Oh, thank you, Bart. Rose, would you like to read? We're at verse 12.
So we're reading both of these parshas?
Oh,
Yeah, we've gone too far.
so much.
I was wondering.
The story we went into next week's Torah portion.
Because I was wondering
I was
about
wondering.
that. I know.
thought,
I didn't want to be
well, because
rude.
sometimes we combine two parshas, but I said, how come we're reading in
Thank
two
you.
Kavod?
Yeah.
So not only this week's portion, we have
So
exceeded.
we have like a little preview of.
So
A first price.
this portion, Parshat Ki Teitzei, first of all, the setting is the Israelites are encamped here in the heights of Moab, and they're about ready to descend and cross the Jordan River and enter into the land of Canaan. And this is one of the last portions in the book of Deuteronomy, one of the last portions that we'll read in preparation for their journey into the promised land. And it is a portion that has more laws in it than any other Torah. So I'm just curious, what struck you about this week's portion? How did you react to it? What provoked you about it? What did you see occurring in the course of it? Go ahead, Rose.
Well, yeah, thank you, Rabbi. You know, what you say about there are so many laws, and that was one of the things, like some of the laws kind of make perfect sense. They seem like, encouraging people to be humane and kind to each other. But there were several WTF moments in, when I was reading this. And I'll just mention one. The beginning, I mean, are we talking about going into Canaan? Because I thought that it was kind of a take no prisoners thing, that Bnei Israel were not going to take women and children as prisoners, but let's assume that they were allowed to. Here this guy takes this woman prisoner, and basically, if he sleeps with her. You know, that's how you got married, is somebody slept with you. But then it says, then if they decide things don't work out, he shouldn't enslave her. He should free her. But A, there's no obligation for him to support her, even though she's damaged goods. And B, what if she's pregnant? Again, nothing is said about that. The other thing that I noticed was there's a few things that relate to King David. One is about Moabites. But Ruth is a Moabite, but yet she got a pass, and and King David descended from her. There's also a section about gleaning, which is the story of Ruth. And then we have about adultery, which both the man and the woman are supposed to be stoned. And then we have David and Bathsheba, which is by any means adultery. But before that, we have this story about if a couple gets divorced and the woman marries somebody else, and then for some reason she's, set free from, then you can't remarry this person. But something similar, or I mean, it's not exactly the same, happened with David and Michal. Although they didn't officially get divorced, it said that Saul was the one who separated them. So it's unclear. So there's a lot of kind of David adjacent stuff in this Parsha that I notice is like, hey, wait a second. And last but not least, I thought that people in the United States in the 19th century were God-fearing, Bible-thumping people, which makes you wonder about the Dred Scott decision, which goes completely against this. If you have a runaway slave, you can't turn them back. So there's a lot of stuff that's kind of makes me scratch my head and say,
So it's, to bring up all the material that you did about how it relates to David and Ruth, and that's really fascinating. Hadn't thought of it in that context. Makes one wonder whether this is being written as kind of a after those events took place and people are kind of writing about it. Or that's
oh yeah.
fascinating. Okay, Mark Lemsey, yeah.
Yeah, for most of the things I can understand the existence of some sort of rationale for the prohibitions at the time this was written, perhaps, or from a survival and promulgation perspective. But the one thing that struck me was not planting anything, a second kind of seed with your vineyard. And that kind of struck me as, I don't understand why on that. And maybe it's because I've been reading about how there are efforts around the world to learn from indigenous cultures about planting multiple kinds of vegetation together that nurture each other and support each other, that allow, that allow for greater chance of flourishing in an organic way than monoculture. And it just struck me as something that I just don't quite fathom the rationale behind from any perspective, any means of rationalization.
So it's interesting trying to assimilate this material through the lens of either seeking out a logical rationale or identifying those that have no logical rationale. That's just is kind of an interesting, I'm just noting that's an interesting way to receive the material.
Well, and
yeah,
even from an ethical or moral perspective, I don't quite, I can't, I'm having trouble wrapping my head around it and trying to look at it from as many different perspectives as I can. One that I can that does not cause cognitive dissonance.
Okay, so whether ethical and moral principles are the only grounds upon which to develop customs and rituals and rites, it's also an interesting way to think about it. There may be other reasons that
Yeah.
rationales for for the kind of customs that we have. I don't know, but it's interesting to at least raise that issue.
Maybe we need to speak with a sommelier or something and understand how it affects the taste of the wine or something. I don't know.
Okay, let me call upon Richard here, and then I've got Jackie and Tom who've got raised hands, and Catherine. Yeah, Richard.
There's a lot of collaborative about women and people divorce, but it's kind of like other passages where Moses is doing the talking. Doesn't mention who's saying it.
Okay.
And that to me is like, let's go this. He wrote this in line.
Okay.
And he was up to please. And we're just trying to make everybody here at the game happy. You guys can divorce your people, and you can do it more to you. It seems an odd place not to have the voice of Moses speaking God's idea about what familial relationship and what love and responsibility for one another involved. And I'm just puzzled.
Okay, fair enough. So that raises a whole big issue about our whole book of Deuteronomy starts off with, these are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel. And that's so as opposed to other portions of Torah where we have at least God's voice being articulated in the narrative. So interesting point. Thank you so much for that. Let me call upon Jackie and Tom, and then Catherine.
Having read this several times now, and of course it's very upsetting and very harsh, to be very primitive. And then I have to remember the times that this was written, and they were surrounded by cultures that did things like sacrificing their children on burning altars. So I think it was an early attempt at something a little more civilized. Doesn't seem very civilized to us now, but for the times, I think it was definitely a step in the right direction. They obviously had a long way to go, as we do today, but I think they were heading in the right direction. So it's helped me to make peace.
Okay.
Shot.
And Tom, did you want to share something? Okay. So placing in that context, Jackie, I want to get back to that in just a moment. And let me call upon and then Robert. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to build a little bit on some things that were previously said. I was really struck by the range of criteria and possible justification for these prohibitions, and some seem connected. I would go further than just say moral. I would say some seem connected to a sense of social justice, right? Sort of giving rights to people who, through no fault of theirs, fell into some kind of captivity, notably women. And others, and there's the usual prohibition against defilement, and how do you address defilement, and defilement being defined all the way from cross-dressing to having sexual relations out of wedlock and so on. And then there are these pop-up things involving animals. The bird, the bird with the offspring, and the ox who can't be muzzled, who shouldn't be muzzled while threshing. So, and those just sort of really take us off on a different kind of a tangent, I think. I haven't quite thought through it yet, but
Yeah, it gives us pause, at least gives me pause to think about the cultural setting in which all this is emerging. I mean, if we were coming up with a set of rules in the 21st century and we're living in a city of 8 million people, probably the subjects that we might cover might be very different, I'm guessing, than the subjects that are being covered by people whose livelihood is dependent more upon agriculture and flocks and animals and things like that. But I wrote down the thing about birds. I'll get back to that too in just a second. You got me thinking about that one. And Robert, please share with us.
Thank you again for another lovely evening. You know, I think much of what was on my plate has already been mentioned, but I'll go through a couple of things. Revelation is always given to raise people up, not to meet them where they are. And I can speak, for example, about my own faith as a Baha'i. Baha'u'llah came, and one of his teachings was collective security. It was something we had no knowledge of. He talks about one people, world government, and so forth. So from my perspective, that's our starting point. And so when I look at Deuteronomy, Leviticus, which I love law because I trust God. And then I think, well, this is to raise them up. What do we see in this parsha? One of the concepts is protection and purification, so that these harsh stonings support the concept of the advantage of the part is best to be maintained by the advantage of the whole. So that if you have one person stoned, it might prevent 1,000 people from committing adultery. Another thing that comes to mind, I think, that really puts where the Jewish people were at this time, there was in the Parshat that which comes from us, which obviously means in that time, they didn't have the facilities we had, and they'd leave it on the ground. They hadn't learned that yet. I remember when I took classes after I finished my education, I took classes in education. One of the things I remembered is that one of the ways that a teacher can evaluate is content, context, process, and product. So what is the context? Look at where they are. They have to be told to cover up when they're done. We can't even think about that today. That would be an abomination. And then what about the product? I'm sorry, but this was 3,500 years ago. Look at all of you now. And by the way, I'm a product of that because this is teaching that went across humanity. There are Jews in Africa, and somebody mentioned the Bible. Well, I'm sorry, but they think it's theirs, but the Old Testament is the Jews, and then we all say, yeah, of course, it's from God. The other thing, I was thinking, I think I shared this recently with a friend, and that is, if we were to move ahead 100 years, and they were to look back at what we're doing today, they'd say, my God, why are they doing that? We don't know what the circumstances of the health of animals were. We don't know what their diseases were. We don't know what the diseases of the plants were, and what diseases would be more typical in those areas in the way of plants and animals. And by the way, a disease spreads like wildfire amongst animals when they're close. So I have thoroughly enjoyed the evening. For me, religion isn't about logic. It's about this. Is it the word of speaking? Is he a man? we all have to make our own decisions, or is he a manifestation of God, a teacher from God? For me, it's the latter. And praise be to God, he taught humanity at a turning point. He brought about a turning point in human civilization, and he said, one God. And I think all of us on this call would give our lives for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Carl. It's a rich way to bring this material together. And let me call upon Deborah, and I have so many notes I've written. I'd like to try to build upon things that people have mentioned. But go ahead, Deborah. And you'll need to unmute. Okay. Deborah, if you want to share with us, you'll need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There are several things in this parsha that have always sort of leapt out at me and raised question, which I am never able to really quite understand. The first is, obviously we know in studying to pay attention to the first word, the first few words at the beginning of a parasha. Perhaps it's random because the editing of all this narrative was, done in a way we don't understand. So it's not really the beginning. But so here, Ki Teitzei, when you go out or in your going out, is this to lead us to understand that, is this linked to you are now getting ready to leave the wilderness, excuse me, and enter the promised land? And, in your going out and forward and progressing and evolving, you are to perform these mitzvot. Primarily, you are not to do all of these. Does this have something to do with going out, but going out, bringing all of this with you? That's an important part of your entering the promised land, both for your evolution, your survival as a people, your development as a community, and you are taking the mitzvot, the primary mitzvot, with you and living that way, so that you may continue to be in relationship with God and carry, this word of God with you and prosper and multiply. Is that what the Ki Teitzei is leading us into as an introduction? But if that's the case, then why this curious ending, which even in reading commentary, I can't quite understand this ending with the relationship and experience with Amalek. I understand Zachor, in lots of different ways. It's powerful in our tradition. Importance of memory and remembering and not forgetting. But what is it about Amalek that is so egregious, more than other enemies of the Bnei Yisrael, that you shall blot out the memory? I don't recall, I'm not aware of in other parts of Chumash where there is that directive, that directive, not only don't remember, but blot out from your memory. And there's that little interplay of remembering and forgetting. Is it because Amalek represents some voice that is to open your eyes to the evil stuff that can still happen, as someone who is wicked and cruel, cutting down the stragglers, at the end, and that you have to know about this reality of evil and of enemies and carry that with you, or do not dwell on this evil, immoral person, this cruel person, Amalek, that you encountered. Do not dwell on that, because you're dwelling on the negative, you're dwelling on the past, and you're carrying that weight with you, which impedes your entering into the promised land, new and fresh.
Deborah, very, very fascinating and provocative reading. So I want to highlight a couple of things that have come up. First, I'd like everyone to just kind of take a deep breath and just think about what's been going on here for the last half hour or so with this kind of conversation, where people have been asking questions about, well, what's the reason for this particular law or prescription, and what does this mean, and I hope that people will kind of assimilate the fact that that's exactly what the rabbis did for hundreds of years after reading this material. So just they would begin to look at this and say, really? What does this really mean? Is this really how we want to live, or how are we supposed to implement this? And so for just a couple of things, in this portion, we had this little mention about the son who's somehow disobedient and is taken before the elders, and the parents say, this child of ours has not been obeying us, and he's supposed to be, okay, well, then he's supposed to be put to death. So the rabbis looked at that, and I'm sure they were probably as confounded and perhaps disturbed, and as many of us would look at that and think. And so they came up with a whole series of prescriptions that needed to be checked off before, in fact, a son could be described as disobedient and should be put to death. And it's likely that it was never followed because they had so many gates that needed to be walked through before that could be done. So they would look at this and they wonder about it. And then Rose raised another one, the one about the Moabites, which is perhaps the most prominent one. No Moabite should ever become a member of the congregation of Israel. And of course, we know that not only does Ruth, who is a Moabite, become part of the nation of Israel, she becomes the great grandmother of King David. So the rabbis looked at that and they said, well, that's not exactly what it means. It means that no Moabite male is supposed to become a member of it. And then we also read about I think, who was it that wrote? Oh, Catherine raised about the birds, right? And there's a passage in the Talmud about a story about a child who goes up and tries to fulfill what it says in here about, don't take the bird out while the mother's nesting, and tries to shoo the mother bird away, and that person falls down from the tree and dies. And they go, oh my, we did what we're supposed to be doing. And in fact, that plays a kind of a key part in the novel as a driven leaf that causes someone to become an apostate. It says he followed what he's supposed to do and he dies, and so the system doesn't work. So much of what we read tonight continues to be this ongoing discussion, trying to figure out what it means. Maybe it should be refined in such a way that it makes it more palatable for us in a community. So that's part of it. The other is just a bigger picture that struck me as we're reading this material, which is, here they are. Moses has everyone assembled, and they're getting ready to cross over into this place that they've been journeying as a group, as a nation, for 40 years. And he gives them this long list of prohibitions and prescriptions that they're to follow. And I just sit back and I wonder, there might have been another way to do it. If any of us have ever, say, chaired a committee or a strategic planning process or something like that, when you get to the end, do you want to take up the last few minutes that you all have together by going over a list of all these instructions that you're supposed to follow? Or might you take the approach, why don't we reflect back on what this was all about? Let's remember our mission statement. Let's what lessons have we learned from our journey? So there's different executive ways that one could manage a group at this point. So I'm kind of fascinated about that. And then Deborah mentions the issue about Amalek. And you're supposed to blot out his memory, and don't forget to blot out the memory. So the end result should be that you don't remember anything of it. So I think about that, and I think, what exactly were they supposed to blot out? What were they supposed to have no memory about anymore? Or what were they to remember about that moment? If you remember, Amalek appears at this moment when they're going through the wilderness. And if you remember the context, what happens is there's a moment when the Israelites say, they begin to worry and they begin to fret. And they actually say, is God among us or not? And it was right after that expression that it says, Amalek descended upon the people of Israel. So one way of that many commentators have understood that moment is that Amalek appears during that moment of the lack of faith and trust and commitment to the mission. So the question is, it's kind of what I think Deborah was getting at, which is, what exactly are they to remember about that moment? Are they to remember what someone else did to us, or are they to remember what we did to ourselves? So that's the kind of provocation about that section about Amalek. The other is this, is what struck me as I was reading the material. And again, Deborah goes back to the beginning of our Torah portion, Ki Teitzei, which in my version is translated as when you take the field, which is a very free translation. Ki Teitzei literally means when you go out. And so on the one hand, what follows that phrase, when you go out, are these series of laws and instructions. But the phrase Ki Teitzei is evocative of the very beginning of their journey, because that is what the journey from their time in Egypt is called. It's called Yitziat Mitzrayim, the going forth from Egypt. And at the very beginning of that departure, the voice of God says, remember this day when you went out from Egypt. Remember, you went out from Egypt. So that phrase, going out, that same verb, yatzah, which is repeated several times during the course of their departure from Egypt. Especially in a culture that is oriented towards stories, it's likely to cause some kind of resonance. That phrase, that sense of teitzei, yatzah, yitziat, it's going to evoke that very origin of where this whole thing started from. And that is also going to evoke, for those who are listening to the story, they're going to remember that part of the story where at the very beginning of the departure from Egypt, the voice says, tell your children it's because of what God did for me in my going out. It's safety, my going out of Egypt. That sense of safety of my going out means that not only did a nation have an experience collectively, each person had some kind of experience of this going out. Each person had some kind of reflection about it, some kind of lesson to draw from. And that's why during our Passover Seders, this comes up again and again, this phrase, tell your children it's because of what God did for me in my going out. So it's incumbent upon those who are presuming the position of being the elder at a table to set the model, to set an example, to say, you know, this is not just a story about something that happened to people some 3,000 years ago. Because I've been instructed by the sacred literature to tell you that I had a going out too. And I'm going to tell you what my going out meant. I'm going to tell you what it means to me to overcome confinement and constraints and narrowness, and to become the kind of liberated human being that this journey is all about. So in that sense, what's happening is we are called upon not only to personalize this story, but also called upon to engage in our imaginative, creative thinking. You can't just look at a list of things that we're being told to do. We have to search deep inside of ourselves. So this sense of combining, if you will, rules and imagination is the very heart of the rabbinic discourse that we call the Talmud. It has rules and it has stories, and they both have a role to play. And what one can see, what I see happening here in this chapter, is that there is kind of a text and a subtext. The text is what we've been reading, you know, in the black letters. How you treat women, how you treat animals, how you treat the fields, how you treat the strangers, blah, blah. But there's also a subtext, which is don't offload your responsibility for becoming a human being onto a list that you're being given. You have a developmental role to play as well. You have an initiative of your own. You have insights of your own. You have experiences of your own that are part of this great venture we call becoming sovereign. I thought about, if you read my commentary, I thought about rivers during the reading of this, because that's where they are. They're at the top of Moab, and they're looking down at the Jordan River, and it's crossing over the Jordan River that gets them to this place of promise. And I thought about that. I thought, well, this whole trip started off with crossing a river, and it's going to end with crossing a river. I'm fascinated by that framing that this literature gives us. And I thought about that. I thought, well, the river that they cross when they first leave the Sea of Reeds, that in a sense represents the escape. That represents the liberation from constraint and confinement. But that doesn't mean that they've immediately developed into a fully responsible either nation or human being. It means that they have found release. Then when we get to the next river, the River of Jordan, where they're going to cross over and create a country, and they're going to have to run a country. I think, what that's about is crossing over that has to do with becoming developing a sense of sovereignty. And on the national socio-political level, a sovereignty has to do with running a country. But on the spiritual, psycho-spiritual level, it has to do with becoming a fully responsible human being. We are no longer blaming others for who you are. So that takes me back to remember about Amalek. You want to focus on what someone did to you? You were a victim, or isn't that terrible? Or do you want to focus on, I had the capacity at that moment to either embrace the mission or to shy away from the mission? I don't know, did you want to say something? Yeah.
I just think you tell me what you think, but it seems to me that if the injunction is it's individual, right? It's singular to remember, and to remember Amalek might be like wherever you're going for, remember you carry Amalek with you behind you. Something nips at your heels, something destroys you, something reaches out to you. Remember that you need to keep aware that you're a human being, that you can have loss while you're going forward. The memory of Amalek may not be a tribe somewhere else. It may just be your less holy self, and you want to go toward your holy self. But going toward means what you're going away from, and you can remember that you don't want to be like Amalek. In the individual, personal application, not a general one.
Yeah, so I think that's profound. So you can either focus on externalities, Amalek as an external threat, or you can focus on that moment having to do with internal dynamics. My failure is to stand up in that moment and say, this is possible to do. Yeah. So this combination of the black letter aspect, the text that we're reading, the series of clear statements, I think is important. And we argue about how to understand exactly what those explicit statements are instructing us to do. But if we miss out on the fact that we're also being summoned to engage in a level of internal reflection and responsibility for what we're becoming individually and as a nation, then I think we're missing out on a profound dimension of what this is telling us to do. And so that's why for the art piece I chose this piece by Monet, and this painting by Monet, which he did while in the water, literally in a boat in the water. And it is a painting that has virtually no points of orientation as to where does land stop, where does the water begin, where does the water end, where does the sky begin. And one of the fascinating things about this painting is that Monet customized his canvas. He ordered canvases cut to a certain size so that it would be essentially a square. And the square provides a very different sense of perspective and orientation than does a rectangular canvas. And so he, in this, both in terms of the physical nature of the painting, as well as what he put on the canvas itself, in a sense, what he's trying to do, I think he's trying to help us focus less on the explicit statements that are there. The trees, the plants, the clouds, the water, the land. And he's trying to have us experience with him, or he's trying to share with us what he was experiencing in the moment. And what he was experiencing in the moment, he then expresses not in a clear representational way. It is an emotional, internal response to what he is before. And so here's a quote from Monet. When you go out to paint, try to forget what objects you have before you. A tree, a house, a field, or whatever. Merely think, here's a little bit of blue and a little bit of pink, and there's a streak of yellow, and then paint it just as it looks to you, the exact color and shape. So Monet is encouraging us not to try and replicate the objects before us. He's asking us to replicate how the objects before us make us feel, or how we experience those objects. And so it's fascinating that in his novel, In Search of Lost Time by Proust, which is all about memory, which is in effect what this whole book is about. It's about remembering this moment. And what does it mean to remember this dynamic of memory? And one of the characters in Search of Lost Time is an impressionist painter, an Elstier, who's a fictitious person, but he paints a painting in which the sky and the water all seem to blend together, and you can't tell exactly the differentiation of these different elements. And he says, look, I'm not painting information here. I'm painting what I see rather than the information that you're telling me is there. And then he says this, we do not receive wisdom. We must discover it for ourselves after a journey through the wilderness, which no one else can make for us. That's how this Torah portion struck me, which is, there's plenty of information here. There's plenty of explicit statements here, and they're important, and we can argue about them, and maybe we can amend them and rework them. But there's another element here, which has to do with memory. Remember when you came out of Egypt. Remember that what the experience was like for you, because your contribution of that memory is part of this whole project of creating sovereignty, both as an actual nation and as an individual human being. So this discovering of wisdom, our rabbis tell us, is best not done in isolation, alone. It's best done in the company of others. And so I'm so grateful to have such a wonderful, wonderful community of people in which we can share our memories and our hopes for the future and how we want to live, the kind of communities we want to create. And it gives me great hope that this journey is going to go on for a long time and is going to richly reward each one of us and the communities in which we abide. God bless you. I look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Well, sei gesund. Thank you.